A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Our Monday update with the Australian Christian Lobby. And today, checking in with the ACL State Director for Victoria, Jasmine Yuen. We're going to talk about an ongoing campaign to remove the Lord's Prayer. We'll talk about a review of the operational aspects of voluntary assisted dying or euthanasia and engagement with the Victorian government and the opposition. That conversation is coming just ahead. We're 90 minutes away from talking about a review that could see the tax deductibility being removed for contributions to school building funds and the teaching of religious education. I'll tell you how you'll be able to have your say. That conversation is 90 minutes away. Then on Faith and the Future with Dr. Camille Majdali, our series is on Turkey's importance in the world. Today we're talking about Ottoman expansion. Engaging conversations ahead on this Monday edition of 2020. Well, on Monday we check in with the Australian Christian Lobby on the political agenda for the week ahead. Jasmine Yuen is the ACL State Director for Victoria. Jasmine, a special welcome along to 2020.
Thank you, Neil. Good morning. It's good to be speaking to your listeners today.
Jasmine, just before we get into some of those issues, and we'll get a bit of a focus on Victoria, that's your stamping ground, and you're responsible in so many ways for getting involved in the politics that's going on in Victoria. But you might have caught some stories of some random stabbing attacks over the weekend, and one of those was in Brisbane. Note another one on the Central Coast in New South Wales, another on the Gold Coast. But there was a 70-year-old grandmother allegedly stabbed in front of her granddaughter, and tragically she died at the scene. And police have reportedly made one arrest in relation to that incident. But just a quick note in honour of this woman, her name was Violene White. A retired school teacher, a wonderful woman of faith, and she was on her way, as reported, that afternoon on Saturday to a Bible study. Her family, they had made a special note of her faith in Christ, and many are concerned about the rising number of violent crimes happening in communities, not only in this particular instance, but all around Australia. Jasmine, at the ACL, you're constantly focused on the changing culture around us, and violence is one of those areas that seems to be increasing as we move away from our Christian foundations. I wonder if you've got a thought on the changing culture.
Yes, Neil, that is really concerning. We definitely see a drift from God and the biblical teaching, and therefore our generation, younger generation, or a little bit older one, they are lacking of biblical worldview. The Barna research actually shows us that there is actually a decline in biblical worldview in each of the generation. And when people are departing from God and the biblical teaching, we see that there is a breakdown of absolute truth as well as the moral standard. There is actually no surprise seeing how our world become now, nationwide as well as in other Western nations as well. Apart from the drifting away from God, we also see that there is a wide influence of social media, as well as the use of drugs and alcohol, breakdowns of family, as well as education is another factor, as well as weak law and order. This armed crimes kind of problem is also rampant in Victoria. We also have lots of stabbings going on in the community, as well as robbery, break-in robbery as well. One of the problems in Victoria, for example, is the age of criminal responsibility being raised to 12 years old. So that is another concerning thing, and it will actually increase this kind of crime in our society.
Interesting things changing so quickly. It's difficult to keep on top of all of the issues and give them all the amount of attention that each one deserves. As you say, worldview being lost, some of our Christian foundations eroding dramatically, and what we're seeing, of course, is a rise in cruelty and violent crime and the weaknesses of law and order, which we're observing significantly. Now, it comes to a lot of the issues that you're working on, and sometimes the issues that you're lobbying and campaigning in, Jasmine. These are the sorts of things that you need to maintain if you're going to get some semblance of those Christian foundations making a difference in the harmoniousness of a society. One of those you're working on, of course, is the Lord's Prayer in Victoria. There's some threat there to the Lord's Prayer in local councils. What's your view of what's going on in Victoria?
Yeah, so I'm sure you know that Premier Allen is actually responding to a fresh call to remove the Lord's Prayer from the Victorian Parliament. It has been a concerted effort in the past few years, not only in the Parliament, but also in the local council. So only not too long ago, the city of Boroondara actually just voted to remove the prayer. So we altogether have 79 councils in Victoria. Out of these 79, we still have 37 council who are still reciting the prayer before they start their meeting, so which is still good. But what I see is that there will be continual push to remove the prayer. So what we are needing to do is to find out the reason why they do so. So I'm waiting for a legal letter through the Freedom of Information to find out why they want to remove the prayer, because there is a lawyer from the Morris Blackburn firm who is actually writing to the local council advising that the inclusion of the prayer was actually unlawful under the Victorian Charter of Human Rights and Responsibility. And this is what she said. She said the Charter requires the people have equal and effective protection against discrimination. People have freedom of thought, religion, belief, and opportunity, and that every person should have that right and opportunity without discrimination to participate in the conduct of public affairs. What she is implying there is that the reciting of the prayer is a form of discrimination for those who don't share the Christian faith. But of course, we disagree of her view, and therefore I'm waiting to get that letter and see what they have to do in order to work better with the local council as well as Premier Allen, the government in Victoria, to retain the Lord's Prayer in the Parliament and in local council.
Well, there's likely to be a battle ahead. And interesting, isn't it, when there are calls for removal of the Lord's Prayer from our federal parliaments, you might think that's one battleground to maintain the Lord's Prayer, but then there are those who are working in our state parliaments and then in our local councils. There are some challenging times ahead, and I guess for every community member who wants to maintain the Lord's Prayer in all of these different levels of government, there's probably some time for action. Hey, let's move on because there's a lot of ground to cover. Voluntary assisted dying laws, there's a review going on in Victoria. What's the latest?
So the latest is that we have a review. The deadline is February 23rd. So in our legislation that is passed in 2017, the law actually required the government to conduct a review in 5 years' time, and that is now. So the review is on the website in engage.vic.gov.au, and the review, when you look at it, is actually on the operational side of things and not on the legislation itself. So what it means is that this review is looking into how the system can improve their procedure in terms of application, consultation, to approval. That is to smoothen some of the hurdles in between and maybe to also fast-track some of the application. So we can be assured that at this stage, it is not about the relaxation of any of the safeguards or regulations, so no change in legislation. But having said that, I would say this review is actually a tactic that the government used to push through some of the things that they want to change. For example, telehealth access for people, especially in the region of Victoria, to apply for VAD easier, and also to push for the lift of banning doctors to recommend VAD to their patients. So, on the surface, this review is on operations, how they operate the whole system. But actually, by gathering information and feedbacks from people who would like to push forth this kind of reform, once they collect those feedbacks, they will have enough and sufficient excuse to say, we want to give telehealth for people in the regional Victoria to access VAD easier, and also allow doctors and nurses to recommend VAD to patients. So I would say this is one of the tactics perhaps the government is using.
So, as you say, it's not as though someone's trying to overturn the legislation. The legislation's in place in Victoria, but there's a review on operations. And from what I hear you saying there, it's a little bit like the government using the review as another opportunity to make the slippery slope even more slippery. And that's a challenging thing for all of us when we think about the challenges that come with euthanasia. Hey, let's move on. Victoria in general, your engagement with the government under Premier Jacinta Allen and the Liberal Party under John Pesutto, the Australian Christian Lobby, give us a little insight into the sorts of work you do on a daily basis, just keeping in touch with and contributing to the political conversation.
I would say last year is a very fruitful year in terms of lobbying, as well as connecting to the government, as well as the opposition. In the government's side, we have a new premier, Jacinta Allen, after Dan Andrews resigned. Everybody say that she is more approachable, more open for conversation. From my end, I would say yes and no. At least I sent her a congratulating her for taking up the new role, and she actually sent me back a thank you letter before Christmas. So there is something good there. And with the Deputy Premier Ben Carroll as well, I met with his Chief of Staff last year to talk about education, and I also have a few correspondence with the Minister for Health about this VAD review as well. So there is good starting point there, good progress. But when you talk to them, whether they are open to listen to us on a very different value, I would say that probably not. We listen to each other respectfully, but I don't think that there will be much changes that is supportive of our conservative values. But with the opposition, there are more open door across the board. I was able to talk to John Pesutto, the opposition leader, for quite a number of times, as well as some of the others, MPs, both in the conservative faction as well as in the moderate faction. So good things is happening there. I could say that in most of the things that we concern about, let's say religious freedom, parental rights, they are on our side, and they say that they are willing to defend that. And the last meeting that I had with Pesutto was just 2 weeks ago, and we were able to get through some of the important things like the Lord's Prayer, and he says that he is really working into retaining the Lord's Prayer, and he says that he is concerning about the anti-vilification law reform that is coming, and he will look into it, and he will be working with us on the conversion law review that is due this year as well. And apart from that, he is also against pill testing, as well as he is not supporting the second injecting room in the CBD. So all these issues, it will still be in working progress, but I would say is in a good working progress.
So I can hear you say there are some positives, but there are also lots of negatives. And while there's a respectful relational listening, there doesn't appear to be a lot of activity in favour of the sorts of things you'll be lobbying for, because I guess you need to have a grassroots movement that happens on the ground in Victoria, where the people are speaking up loudly in those issues. That needs to happen more and more in Victoria, doesn't it?
Yes, definitely. And this is why we are actually going to launch a 3-year community education campaign, and the first launch is this Saturday. So what I hope to do through this campaign is to raise awareness in the community about indoctrination in Victorian State School. There is also to wake up the parents and the voters in the community so that to invoke change in Victoria. The change that I'm looking into seeing is hopefully there is the 2026 state election, and thereafter the change in school curriculum. As I mentioned before, education is a core problem for our younger generation as the changing culture in a society. So I'm really hoping that there will be more people, more Christians standing up to help us in this community education campaign.
So many people shaking their head and wondering how Victoria has gone so far down a path of all of these anti-Christian views and principles and values that have been employed in the state. There are some challenging times ahead. A lot of that comes down to schools, doesn't it? And you've got your community education campaign launch coming up from the 10th of February. That's pretty exciting. And for Victorian listeners to get in behind that, that's going to be something significant. But, of course, some of the core problems in Victoria around, what you could call an indoctrination of children in schools. How do you see those sorts of things in Victoria?
That is a huge problem. It's not only in the recent years, but it has gone for at least 2 decades. So in Victoria, we have 2 concerning programs for school children. That is respectful relationship and sexuality education. The respectful relationship is actually more than teaching kids to be respectful, but is actually a slow and subtle brainwashing of children about gender and sexuality. From teaching them that gender is a social construct that can change and evolve over time, and to teaching them about gender diversity in the higher grades. To be honest, the respectful relationship, they will have new content coming up. That is to introducing the preferred pronouns as early as to young children in grade 1 and even prep. And for sexuality education, if you go through the content, it is just concerning because it's pornography. So in our school in Victoria, where we come down to this is because the state school curriculum has really focused on gender theory, identity politics, and political activism. And that is also why we see school children attending climate change protests, as well as recently the pro-Palestine protests during school hours. And that is a huge concern. So our education system and curriculum definitely need a change, but if we don't campaign and raise awareness in the community, and there is no change in government, and there is definitely no change. So definitely we need a change in 2026.
2026, that's the next state election, and an opportunity between now and then to put that sort of pressure on politicians, whether they're in government or whether they're aspiring to as candidates in an opposition sense. Jasmine Yuen, wonderful getting your insights once again today, and just great to be able to bring something of a more specific focus, just getting down into a little bit more detail of what's happening in the state of Victoria. Jasmine is the ACL State Director for Victoria. You can connect with Jasmine and you can respond to some of those things we were talking about, where you can have your say on the Australian Christian Lobby website, acl.org.au. The website is ACL. It stands for the Australian Christian Lobby.org.au. Jasmine, thanks so much for another great update today on 2020.
Thank you, Neil.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.